Welcome back. You here with Goldberg. Today, I'll be talking about this primary election in New York City, which has garnered quite a great deal of attention. So, on the right side, you have Eric Adams, who is clearly of Nordic descent. They're making a lot of kerfuffle. He could still win the election as an Adams. They could work some magic with the polls. They might have like a fusion with Republicans, but it was more of this what's happening to the Democratic Party? Why have they allowed this guy to take power? This Zohran Mamdani. Someone made the observation on Twitter X that he looks more American than Ramaswamy, and there's truth to it, to be perfectly honest. In fact, the Cuomo organized crime family were busted trying to change his complexion, darken his beard a little bit so that he would come off as an Arab cell Muslim. He is a Muslim, a Shia variety, which, according to Brother Armor, those people are kind of nutcases. Funny enough, actually, it's just like when you deal with the Catholics and Orthodox, but with the Muslims, when you start bringing up certain ideas, they'll try to claim they're not relevant because that's supported by Shia, which is interesting. And all told, this guy is whiter than the average Nick Fuentes follower. There was a Wignat live stream I listened to a long time ago. I forget the name off the top of my head, but the moderators, the panelists were white, and then constantly people calling in were these brothers, collard green cells. Like, oh, I just can't get laid, mate. So it goes to show you. These are his parents, and to be perfectly honest, I find it hard to believe he is the byproduct of them. I mean, someone's going to say, well, genetic recombination, bro. You have to remember, though, his mom, unambiguously a Pooja, she even was involved in producing a film where a Pooja was trying to get with Tyrone Denzel Washington. But before she was with this Indian professor of post colonial studies and liberalism, she in fact was getting smashed by a Care Bear. So could we come to the conclusion microchimerism? Classic case. Proceeding on, what are his actual policies? You have to dig in because you're going to hear a lot of bluster and noise from both sides. I'll try to go down the line here. Not very interesting. Frankly, NYC did this with Bill de Blasio, who I consider to be even more of a disgrace because while he was an embodiment of a supposedly heritage-esque American, if you looked at his backstory, he was just a clown. Like he changed his name because he was a liberal. His wife looked like a zombie. His son was just, oh my God. His daughter, though, fair enough, fair enough. Okay, so Mamdani was born in Kampala, Uganda, moved to the US when he was 7 years old. He attended Bronx High School of Science. It's interesting. Apparently, he didn't do that well in the Bronx compared to whiter areas of New York. I wonder what that says about our future. Due to sky-high rent prices, he wants to freeze rent on rent-stabilized apartments. Wait, freeze rent on rent-stabilized apartments. The government's going to fix what the government tried to fix. Building more affordable housing, including 200,000 new affordable union-built rent-stabilized units. I heard something the other day, it was by Lamprey, where he was breaking down the scam of affordable housing. And we were just, I was just hearing when I was at the barber shop the other day, like they're giving these units to Haitians. And these are relatively rural areas, like country boy type yokel regions. And they just bring in these folks, ostensibly work at the factories, but they give them Section 8 housing and they increase the crime. The cops are always going for domestics or drug issues, assaults. Public transportation. He wants to eliminate fares on city buses and improve their speed by building and expanding priority lanes. How about you just have low fees that everyone has to pay, like 50 cents, 75 cents? I mean, could it be that maybe certain demographics refuse to pay and so they had to change laws in many municipalities? Oh, it's no longer a crime if you don't pay for transportation like everyone else because it's racist. You do realize that so many of the inconveniences we deal with day to day are because either super rich people aren't obeying laws or historically butthurt Americans don't obey laws, and then everyone else has to suffer. That's essentially how it comes down. Invest in evidence-based gun violence prevention programs. See, you might not like the outcomes of that. increasing funding to hate violence prevention programs. That is an absolute scam. We know who's committing the violence in major cities, and this would just be a way to give out, crony contracts and find some way to blame whites that are probably a very small number of those in the region at that point, as in New York. The cost of living strain beyond rent is the price of essentials. He has plans to address by creating city-owned grocery stores that will pay no rent or property taxes, buy and sell wholesale prices from centralized warehouses, and partner with local vendors to keep prices down. So once more, okay, the government can solve this problem. If you were clear cut on stuff, well, I mean, you have to look at the inflation question. And unfortunately, ever since Nelton's book, The Deficit Myth, they've just been on a drunken sailor splurge. Inflation affects regular people's lives. It affects supply chains and whole other things. Making the government have grocery stores, all that would probably happen, they'd be mismanaged, they would be embezzled from by employees, and there'll be another target for those who don't want to pay for stuff, their food, who don't want to pay for their clothes, that sort of thing. The same problem that's been destroying city after city because we can't talk about it because it's putting the spotlight on people who have been abused for years, so they should be permitted to commit crimes. Let's see, free childcare, minimum wage $30 by 2030, and regulate delivery apps. $30 should be the minimum wage in New York City anyway. I mean, you can barely live on that in other parts of the country at this point. And that's basically, oh, he said, yeah, taxes on millionaires and billionaires. Well, if you can get them to pay the taxes, sure. That's always the problem, is that they have means of avoiding it. And I'm curious how strong the powers of the New York City Assembly or Town Council would be to address this. Although, yeah, they should probably pay more, some of these corporations. And then he's going to resist ICE. So another reason for the America Firsters to be happy, I guess. And that's because of the alignment. Well, I'll talk about that in just a little bit here. What's interesting, this guy is 33 years old. He's considered, could be the first millennial mayor if they don't interfere in the election. And in a lot of respects, the boomer attacks don't work so well. They were saying, oh, well, he's only been an American citizen since 2018. Yeah, well, isn't that what you said? All that it takes to be an American is a piece of paper. So shut the hell up. That's your entire argument. The other was, he was a community organizer. You didn't have a real job. It's another example of a tone deaf attack. You can see on YouTube, you can see in the stats, people are not attaining regular jobs. They're working multiple, they're in the gig economy, they're NEETs. They're not going to be super sympathetic towards, oh, you need a real job if you're going to get into politics. So yeah, community organizer tier roles, we know Obama was one, and he did his own amount of damage to the country. But that's actually significant in city politics. That means you have a lot of influence. You probably have ties to businesses, corrupt contracts, that sort of thing. So in a way, it's well suited for this job if he becomes mayor. But the boomers need an answer, and that answer would be addressing the serious problems, which is reducing, reducing inflation in a serious sense, and of course, following through with the deportations that were promised. As far as this relates to the Care Bear question and America First, he, as in Mamdani, got some fame because when they were doing the mayoral debate, the moderators kept pressing him on basically, do you support the right of the Care Bears to have an ethno state? And he said they can be a democratic state, but he wouldn't say essentially, yeah, they can strictly be ethno, and everyone else was opposed to that. Now, this goes to the whole thing. More people are noticing, and I find that limited in a sense because, number one, they started the Echo meme back in, I think it was 2015 or 2017, so it's been a while. How much has changed? The Care Bears are on the verge of achieving what General Clark predicted, and saying, well, I was right, I predicted it. It doesn't matter because it shows you to be impotent. It means you couldn't prevent anything from occurring. It's not surprising that the anti-Care Bear credibility in the mainstream was first taken over by the left. And it does not mean the right wing is necessarily going to benefit from it. Because you might go, oh, well, we're America First. If we align with these Arabs, like they would always do, they'd be supporting Ilhan Omar or Rashida Talabani because she would criticize the Care Berries. And then in traditional fashion, which they would attack boomers for this, but America Firsters were doing the same thing, hide behind Kanye West, an obvious vehicle to humiliate white men, and yet just hide behind him because he says what you want to hear. They are aligned with Ali Alexander, Scammy Davis Jr., a homosexual who allegedly was trying to groom young white men. I mean, some of these America Firsters, these Groypers, do seem to have a fantasy about being dominated by a brother. I don't know where that comes from, but they're saying that Kendachi Owens, they were really excited about Big Booty Tulsi, and I told you that DNI is a worthless position. What happened? Well, she said, yeah, the Iranians probably aren't really getting a weapon. And Trump was like, I don't care. I'm going to do whatever I want. You got to have your own movements. You got to have something that's more robust than just yapping on the internet endlessly. And you don't see that from America First, sadly. They had some ground game after Stop the Steal, and that pretty much faded and it just turned into hubris all around the one question of the Care Bears. We have some evidence of this when I brought up in the Ellentown video that young men should be like joining ICE. They should be becoming military officers, maybe getting into the congressional systems as staff or try to get on the Intel Committee, NSC, places where you can build an infrastructure to where you could take power eventually. And the response is always scorn. It's always they'll search for any headline to claim that they're losing because they're addicted to defeat. So let's be real. They claim no deportations are happening, which is a lie. And they're not just deporting criminals. There's all these stories in the media of the liberals crying because this guy got deported and he just had a minor drug charge because he was suffering from some medical condition. Uh, these are not 100% confirmed, but supposedly America is losing more migrants than gaining it. There was another one about there may have been up to 1 million self-deportations. Even if you cut that down to 2 or 300,000, it's still substantial. And we have not yet funded the BBW bill, the real crackdown. So these people, instead of being constructive, they're always trying to find a reason why they're going to lose and they should just go back to crying on the internet. It's why I consider America First, even though, Nick is a charismatic guy, he's wasting a lot of his talents on this essentially single issue. And what he did after basically Trump will say something, and Trump's an octogenarian. Well, they'll seize on that and claim that, oh, nothing's happening, even though Rubio's from Florida, where the Chinese have been doing the ecological warfare. He's been putting scrutiny on visas from China, including on students, which they should be doing. And we should be, frankly, summary judgment for these people caught with doing terrorism and sabotage and involvement in the fentanyl industry. We treat these foreigners way too lightly. When we found out that Stephen Miller was overruling Brooke Rollins and basically running the DOJ, DHS, then Fuentes came out and started attacking Stephen Miller and saying they're only promoting him because he's Care Bear. It's like you are completely ill-equipped to lead any movement because you have no strategy whatsoever. You need people in those positions. And remember, Stephen Miller was basically a lone voice in Congress as far as the staff's concerned for years with Jeff Sessions. He was not well liked. He was not he wasn't working for the speaker or anything like that, a majority leader. And this shows you if there's more people, stuff can happen. If you had 5 Groypers that were ICE agents doing a raid, they might have some creative solutions. They might be the Jurgen Struess of America. But you tell them to do anything and they just start mocking you. Same thing with Wignats. Nick himself put out a list of books to read, and there were Groypers responding that they're too low IQ to read a book. I mean, yeah, no surprise. So just keep listening to it. And that's, unfortunately, people are too addicted to the idea that a following online translates to real political change. Remember when Barl Kenjamin ran for parliament, Sargon of Akkad, he got slaughtered despite having a huge popularity on YouTube. When Malamim was kicked off of YouTube and he went to BitChute, he got less than 10% of his following. People are lazy. This is the issue with the internet. It's sedated a lot of whites to where they would rather be, playing their video games, crying about this, living with mommy, schizophrenic. Unfortunately, this is what happens. And so any movement forward, if you want to challenge what's going on, if you want to have your own version of like a Zohran Mamdani, you need to be practical because this weird, okay, we can align with the left. Remember, as soon as you start talking about high levels of deportation, changing immigration laws, or curtailing women's rights, oh, they're going to put you in a cage. So you got to keep that in mind. You got to be a little bit more strategic. Unfortunately, it just seems right now it's about, I want to be right no matter what, and I'll burn everything else down. So, yeah. But like I said, we're going to see more of this. It's a byproduct of the migration system. It just remains to be seen. Will the Care Bear lobby push back enough? Will they prevent these people from taking office, or will they fail? But if they fail, does that mean that their power is not as strong as a lot of right wingers claim? Let me know what you think.